I remember reading Erickson's Childhood and Society as a young college-age student and beginning my training as a teacher. And the thing that struck me was the back part of the book, Childhood and Society, that talks about the cultural effects of being born in different places on the personality of the people involved. So the idea of cultural differences was an early learning experience for me. And it got exacerbated or enlarged when I went to live in Iran. And I lived in Iran for 6 years. And it was quite different from anything I was accustomed to. And the one thing I found out was there are multiple different ways to raise healthy children. And I think that was a very useful knowledge to have when I came back to the United States, and Head Start was just beginning. And we were talking about educating low-income children was a big asset, I think, to my thinking about what we could do to make education more relevant to low-income kids, and particularly low-income minority kids. What we need to do is to help lots of people understand the difference between development and education, that children can be developmentally competent and fail in school because they don't know the kinds of information that schools need them to know. And so we need to be able to separate out those children. We have to stop thinking that just because children don't know their ABCs, that there are in some ways developmental failures. They may be fine developmentally, but we've not given them an opportunity to learn. So recognizing that the opportunity to learn is critical to young children, and particularly to low-income children, and that school failure is one of the most difficult emotional challenges they face. So we need to be very careful that we're providing them with all the resources they need to be successful. And that includes not just emotionally supportive environments, but it also means intellectually and cognitively supportive environments. I think that the world is changing so fast that children of color are a very diverse group now, and that we need to not think about them as a solitary group. So as we are thinking about children of color, that we think about not just that they are faced with similar challenges in terms of prejudice and discrimination, but that they have various resources, and that we should be building on the resources as much as we are on being aware of the challenges that they face that are different than children who come from more privileged backgrounds. So recognizing their strengths is what we are, I think, doing right. What we're doing wrong is trying to paint them with a brush of developmental failure when what they're missing is opportunity to learn. Well, I think one of the issues that we need to think more about, and we haven't been addressing, is the systemic reasons for why we have children who are in need of these services. We've tended to invest our time and energy and money in individual solutions and not look at the systemic ones that are causing the problem. So we need to be more alert, I think, to the kinds of challenges so many communities are facing, and see whether or not we can't do something about the systemic problems as well as the individual problems. It's easy to talk about individual problems, but when you say, well, how do we help there not be so many poor children? How do we fix it so that we don't have the same generations of kids coming in another 20 years that we had 20 years ago? I think I mentioned that I lived in Iran for quite a long time. And I also worked in the Native American community for 6 years. And again, it was a contrast between what I was accustomed to and how people were living very capable lives. And their children were competent, but not able to function well in American schools. So this discrepancy between being a part of a community that's functional and not being able to master the larger community became, to me, more of a problem than I had thought about it when I started. I began to see that different children needed different things, and that we should not automatically assume that everyone learned to learn the same way. It seems to me that we need to take a much closer look at the match between what we're providing and what children need, and that means assessment. And I don't fear assessment in the same way many of my colleagues seem to. If what we're saying is we use multiple ways to assess what kids are learning, and we don't take it as truth or not truth, we take it as clues to what we ought to be doing in ways that we can improve programs so we get better outcomes for kids. And it seems to me that's a perfectly good way to assess children without implying that there's something wrong with them. What we're saying is, how do you learn best, and how can we change our curriculum so that you learn best? I think there are lots of teachers who they seem to know what kids ought to learn. Their standards are implicit. They don't seem to have to read down on the list of the goal standards of the goal outcome to know what children ought to be learning and being able to do. And once you know that, then you can provide it for different kids in different ways. Your whole groups of children may need more emphasis on vocabulary building. That means they need to hear more stories. You may want to invite the library people to come in and read stories to kids. You might want to encourage their parents to take them to the library. Whereas other children are just fine. They don't need any more vocabulary building, but they may need more opportunity for free play. So what kids need, we need to be able to assess with their families and the communities and provide that rather than saying one size fits all. Well, perhaps the most important one is the change is slow. And if we look at kindergarten, for instance, it took 100 years to move from the first kindergartners in St. Louis to pretty much everybody, the last state mandating kindergarten in the 40s or 50s. The expectations that we will have well-trained, well-educated teachers without paying higher salaries is just a dream. We can't possibly keep teachers working in Head Start and other programs, community-based programs, at the current salary levels. So it means that we either have to give up the notion of educated, well-trained teachers, or we're going to have to figure out a way to pay them. I think differential staffing has not been looked at as carefully as we ought to look at it. I think there may be ways that we can have leadership people who are responsible for more than one classroom, who have more skills and knowledge than other people do. So we ought to be experimenting a little bit with different models of delivery that will help pay people to get a decent education. I've been very interested in trying to promote libraries and schools to encourage older people in the community to come in and read stories to kids. Chapter books. Lots of kids don't have anybody at home that can read chapter books with them. So I think there are lots of opportunities for older people to make a contribution to the community and feel the rewards that come from interacting socially with other people. I feel like I've changed that much. The body has changed more than anything else, I think. Names have gotten away from me. That is one thing that I found. But everything else, I think, still working. And I'm enjoying teaching. And I get out and I see kids and they come sidle up to me and say, "Whose grandma are you?" And I enjoy it just as much as I always did. Little arms around the neck makes a big difference.